Hello and welcome back to my teaching series, The Jesus That John Knew. This is now part 9 in our series, and today we're going to look at the verses in John chapter 1, and we're going to be reading from verse 38. You'll remember from the last episode that we saw Jesus give the invitation to the first disciples that began to follow him, and they had this curious exchange where Jesus turns to them and asks the question, "Why are you following me?" And I suggested to you at the time that this is a very profound question, because the question is, what are you seeking? You see, the truth is that everyone follows Jesus for a reason, and understanding the reason that we follow him is key to perhaps everything that ensues in our walk with God. But the disciples' response to the question was interesting. When it asked, "What are you seeking?" their response was, "Rabbi, where are you staying?" And Jesus, I think, playing along with them, says, "Well, come and you will see." And my suggestion to you was that this invitation to come and see wasn't really so much an invitation just to come and see where he was living, not even come and see how he was living, but more that if they came, they would see. In other words, if they took that step of faith, if they crossed that line between the temporal and the eternal, they would see. They would see something. And seeing and believing is a very interesting principle that we'll see weaved all the way through the Gospel of John. And what I've suggested already, and is I'm going to run again here, is that what Jesus is wanting to say, it's not so much that seeing is believing, not at all, but rather that believing is seeing. In fact, as this book closes, there'll be the discussion with Thomas, the one we call Doubting Thomas. And Thomas is credited, of course, because he saw and believed. But blessed are those of you who don't see, but yet you have believed. Because the truth is that believing is seeing, and that's a very, very important motif. But at the moment, we're left at this early stage of the gospel thinking about this business of coming and seeing, of what it would mean to be able to be a group of people that instead of just seeing at our problems and at our situation, be able to see through into the eternal realm, to see through into the divine. And so we're going to get caught up in a story with everyday people who are about to come, and as they come, they will see. So now, we pick up the story in verse 38, and Jesus said to them, "Come and you will see." In verse 39, he says, "Come and you will see." And so they came and saw where he was staying, and they stayed with him for that day, and it was about the 10th hour. Now verse 40, one of the two who heard John speak and followed Jesus was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. And he first found his brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which means the Christ, and he brought him to Jesus. And Jesus looked at him and said, "So you are Simon, the son of Jonah. Your name shall be called Cephas." Now this is a very important thing to see right away, because Jesus is showing you something really fundamental. He's seeing right through, and he's saying to Simon, who he meets at outset, "You are Simon, the son of John, but you shall be called Cephas," or as we know him, Peter. Now watch, because this is an important picture that's being placed. Here is Simon. It's going to be, as we all know, someone who's full of self-assurance and full of self-confidence and full of self-effort. And his name, he's going to be the Simon, the one they call Simon. But he will be Peter. Now, the issue for us to see here is this, is that Simon represents the man under the law. Simon represents the man of self-effort. But Peter represents the man under grace. Simon is the man who's full of his own self-importance. Peter is the man who has been broken and come to know his own impotence. And the two could not be more different. And it's upon this rock, well actually the word Petros means pebble, upon this pebble, this man who's come to see himself as he really is, upon him, upon this kind of simplicity, on this kind of impotence will I build my church. So immediately we have this lovely picture of regeneration. You are and you will be. Now of course the new covenant message is this: you are, and you will be who you already are. You see, because Christianity is the discovery, is the coming to understand who you already are and what already is. It's discovering the isness, if you like, of God. The next day, it says here in verse 43, Jesus decided to go up to Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We found the one of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." And Nathanael said to him, "Can any good thing come from Nazareth?" And Philip, with the only evangelistic line that he knew, simply said, "Come and see." And there's a lovely simplicity to that all that Philip did was what was done to him. Come and see. And as Nathanael came, he truly would see. But for that in a moment. C.S. Lewis said this. He said the price of Jesus is to want him, but the price of wanting him is to be willing to have our minds converted. Now the thing of it is this: when we come as simple, linear, A equals B, or if I do A, B and C I get D, E and F type of people, we're going to have a lot of mind altering that's going to need to take place, a lot of reframing that's going to need to take place if we're going to really engage in the mystery of Christ, if we're going to really come and see, or if we're going to miss it. But the wonderful thing is that once the mind has been stretched to a new idea, it never quite is able to go back to its old dimensions ever again. So now Nathanael now approaches Jesus, having been shepherded there, having been found by Philip. He now comes before Jesus, and Jesus says to him, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." Now, of course, we have this imagery in the Gospels of the fig trees that are holding out leaves, but yet they have no fruit. But here is a fig tree under which the fruit has already dropped. The fruit hasn't fallen very far from this particular tree either, because he's about to say to Nathanael, Nathanael, an Israelite in whom there is no guile. And I'm tempted to think that what Jesus is looking at when he's looking at Nathanael, rather like he's looking at Peter when he says to him, "You are Simon, you will be Peter," is he's seeing his potential, he's seeing who he is in Christness, he's seeing him in the fullness of who he is. And yet this is a little early in the piece for Nathanael, but for Jesus can see Nathanael and can see that Nathanael is very much the fruit from the tree of life. Nathanael says, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God." And Jesus says to him, "Because I saw you under a tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these. Indeed, you will see the heavens opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on a ladder." Now, of course, the imagery of Jacob is right there, isn't it? But I want you to hear something. Hear what Jesus says to Nathanael in the first throes of his engagement with him. You will see greater things than these. Now let me make you understand this. What Jesus is introducing Nathanael to is the child phase, because in the child phase we'll see greater things than these. Of course, it's impressive the fact that Jesus was able to see him under the fig tree. And incidentally, aren't you glad that Jesus can see you under your fig tree? Aren't you glad that when we're yet far off, that Jesus can see and see through into our situations, and despite the cynicism that even Nathanael presents with, Jesus is able to see through to who he really is and say, you're one in whom there is no guile, let me tell you that. But here's the wonderful truth, here's the wonderful thing for us to grasp. If the child phase is that you will see greater things than these, the wonderful thing is the teenage phase, the more mature phase in Christ, is that you mustn't marvel, because you'll do greater things than these. And so here we have the beginning of our journey, this moving across from the seeing the greater things in John 1 to the doing of greater things in John 14. But now, the proposition for us at the moment is this, is that what Jesus wants us to understand is, all that he's done, what John wants us to understand rather, is that all that he's written for this one purpose, that you might believe, and having believed, you might go on in your believing. You see, because John wants us to move from seeing to doing.